and welcome to Down to Art. I'm your host, Kristy Gordon, and today I'm joined by Scott Maier, a professional artist, instructor, and video producer living in Northern Colorado. So welcome, Scott.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So Scott has a Bachelor of Fine Art in Painting from the Maryland Institute College of Art and a Master of Fine Arts in Painting from University of Alaska Fairbanks. He's been a teacher for more than 15 years and is video producer for the artistnetwork.com. And I've worked with Scott doing online courses for the Artist Network and Peak Media. And what's always really struck me about you, Scott, is just how well you organize the content in a way that really works for the students, for the people taking the classes. And lately I've been really encouraging the artists I work with in my art mentoring program to dive into teaching. And I think right now it's such a great way, to dive into teaching on Zoom and online classes and just get your hands in there teaching and also supplementing our income as artists. So I'm so excited to talk to you today about how to find our sort of voice and our identity as an art teacher and how to balance being a practicing artist with being an art teacher. So yeah, I was thinking, like, you're a full-time artist and you're also like a kind of a full-time teacher. And I wonder, when did you start teaching?
Well, I started teaching in grad school as a teaching assistant. They kind of threw us into the deep end, and right away teaching teaching foundational drawing. Before that, when I was at MICA, I was enrolled in their MAT program. So, I had the vision of becoming a K through 12 teacher. Reached that point where I said, I love painting right now. There's so much more for me to explore that I'm not ready at 21, 22 years old to start teaching full time at high school. I needed more time for myself, and that led to graduate school, where I then was able to see the difference between teaching at a higher grade level versus K-12, and just kind of went on from there. So never went back to public school teaching.
Interesting. And when did you get involved with the Artist Network and Peak Media?
So I've been with Artist Network for a little over 6 years now. So in the interim, I taught a bit at University of Alaska and Fairbanks. Started teaching online through the Art Institute's chain of schools. So it's had its ups and downs. It's no longer around as an online institution, but it kind of opened my eyes to the benefits and the drawbacks, the comparisons between teaching online versus on ground in a kind of a traditional setting. Artist Network, we're looking for instructional designers, and so with my background in teaching for 11 or so years online, it helped me to kind of translate that into working with artists like you to create online courses for our audience. So.
Yeah, and I remember when we first filmed our first class together, I think in 2016, we had a slightly different format than what we've done more recently. Like, I really enjoyed the way we structured, all of the classes, but the first one was structured really based on like every, having an assignment all the way along at the end of each module, sort of as if the person watching the video was really taking a class. And now we've sort of been doing more courses where I'm kind of painting and showing the process, but it isn't so like assignment based, if you know what I mean. Like, do you want to talk about those two kind of structures a little bit? And
I think moving? Yeah, no, that's I think a good observation, and one that we've been looking at. There's two basic models. There's a kind of a curriculum-based model that's kind of more traditionally aligned with kind of traditional schools, where you would have 12, 16 weeks or so of a class, and you have specifically designed assignments, and you're learning and you're building your skills as you go. And that's kind of the approach that I brought to the company, is building these larger kind of courses that lead you through a curriculum. But another education model that's we see often that many artists have worked with is this kind of demo-based, kind of workshop-based approach, where it's you're learning as you're seeing this artist work through the problems on their canvas. And it took me a little while to kind of transition into that, to really understand that project-based, kind of workshop-based mentality, and see how the two work together, how a traditional course might also then be supplemented or balanced with these more targeted workshops that we worked with you later on. So we have your foundation course, but now, students can take that, they can learn the foundations, but now they can also take your class on painting like Sargent or Rembrandt. And it's on a specific topic, and you're working the issues out through a kind of targeted project or targeted painting.
That's interesting. And I think the first one was like super long too. And I think I know people with all the social media and stuff maybe have like less and less attention span. And I feel like that the more recent ones that we were doing that were more like workshop-y, they were like a little shorter too, maybe like edited a little bit, like we don't have to show every single second. Do you find that? Do you find that in some ways, I think I find that in some ways people actually are happy to get something a little shorter. They don't actually want to commit like 10 hours, to something that's just like a little shorter, but still shows you everything you need to know is good.
I mean, when you think about the world that we're talking about right now, and where I'm mostly immersed in is fundamentally different than that of, say, a traditional learning institution, in that, a student going to a traditional learning institution, school, art school, or whatever, you're going to that school to say, tell me what I need to learn, and you earn their certificate. You're getting proof that you've gone through this robust process to learn what the school has determined is valuable, and especially if it's an accredited school, it has to meet certain standards that are determined by a whole committee of other people at school. So there's a lot that goes into saying that a BFA or an MFA has met a certain standard in that, and so that's fundamentally different than what we're seeing through our audience here, where it's much more self-directed. People have a general interest in learning how to paint. They're all at different kind of stages in their development and are looking for different things, and it's generally self-directed. You have to kind of pick and choose and curate for yourself what your development is going to be. And sometimes you kind of rely on teachers, like you have your mentorship program, so you can work directly with somebody and you give your advice, and they may go to somebody else and they might give some totally different advice, but there's no kind of standardization. And so I think that's a big difference in that, if I'm saying I want to grow and learn, and look, I might go into YouTube, I might go to some of the artists that we're working with here at Artist Network, and watch for a little while and say, what's that nugget of wisdom that's really going to help me in this? And I'm trying to plug that in around all the other things that are going on in life. And so for me, I'm not sure if it's as much of an issue of attention span versus just kind of that self-direction. And I think most people don't really know what they want. We know, but when you get down to it, when you're trying to make specific decisions for what to do next, it can be difficult to do that. And you say, I know I need to get better at drawing or painting or something, but generally you're following the inspirations and saying, oh, that looks interesting, let me try that out. And so I think that's where I'm at right now. And then letting the time frame be dictated by the content, really, what. There are sometimes if you just need to see a simple technique and that's going to lead to a breakthrough for somebody, there's no need to kind of labor on it and make it longer when it doesn't need to be. And yet if there's a concept that is much more involved, then you kind of let that lead it, and rather than there be some sort of standard kind of protocol that we hear. There was a time when you say no videos over 5 minutes, nobody watches more than 5 minutes, but that's been proven wrong in so many ways. And we're all looking for that magical formula. And I just feel like when we do that, we end up just keep chasing these things that are always evolving, and we end up not really identifying with what works for us. So
I think that's so true. And I think it's actually so great that we're in this era of people can be kind of self-directed, because there's so many different forms of art I really love that in my art mentoring program, that people can pick and choose what they want to focus on. And I think like, yeah, the online classes opens up a whole new world of possibility from all around the whole world, that people can like tap into whatever little pieces of knowledge that they want to get. And that, I just never even thought of that. I think that's like, so true compared to the like, college, like sort of model that's more standardized, and doesn't even always give you what you want actually in the end anyways. But it's definitely beneficial, but you still might go to college and come out being like, I actually don't know this thing that I wanted to get out of it. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And do you find like, what kind of tips do you have for anyone who wants to get started? Maybe they're like sort of a new, they don't feel totally ready. Who feels totally ready to start teaching? Like, but we always have something to like offer. We normally, even if we end up teaching, say, kids like initially or whatever, to just like dive into it. But what do you have any kind of tips for someone who might be wanting to get started with online teaching?
Yeah.
Whether it's like recording, videos, or just doing like a live Zoom, class, and how, just any tips that you might have.
Yeah, I think recording yourself goes a long way. So much of the teaching process is actually performative, right? Where and not that we have to perform, we have to maintain a certain amount of energy to keep people engaged, but it is like a performance in the way that they're like having a rehearsal can go a long way. And I mean, it's hard though, because I never did that kind of consciously. It just kind of worked out for me. So while I was teaching online, I was also teaching on ground. And so I could kind of compare the language I was using online versus what I was doing on ground. And what I found is online, it helped me become much more efficient. It engages part of the brain that has to really visualize how somebody might interpret what you're saying, because you're not getting that personal feedback. When teaching on ground, there's a certain amount of kind of forgiveness that you can have, because you can kind of talk through some of your thoughts as you're trying to formulate what you're thinking about these topics, or what might help the student really figure out how these things work. So for example, with perspective, I would kind of go through my lecture, my spiel about how I think you kind of think about linear perspective, but then you're looking out at the students and it is clear that it's not landing on some people. And then you're like, oh, crap, okay, what did I miss here? Okay, let me try it this way. And let's try this exercise. And you can kind of start to form this custom thing. But again, because you have that ability to kind of adjust as you go, I didn't really, like, over time, I would slowly kind of refine my shtick, as it were. But I think doing it online and kind of recording yourself and playing it back, recording it again and playing it back, and say, how can I be more precise with my language? And how can I visualize how people are going to connect with it? I think it goes a long way to really clarifying your thoughts, and that there's a lot of value in that. And so, I mean, I think teaching is just a tremendous way to learn. And I think it should be included, for any kind of practicing artist in some way, whether it's just an internal dialogue you're having with yourself. It can do kind of wonders to help you really clarify what's happening, so that if you can really kind of empower the intuitive aspect of your work with some kind of clarity. So and say, I'm doing this, and here's the results that I'm getting, and I understand what's really happening. I'm not just responding in a kind of an emotional level that says, I like it, and you want to start with there. But I think being able to analyze it more deeply is helpful, and doing that through the voice of a teacher can be really helpful in that, if that makes sense.
That actually totally makes sense. I think my work for sure improved when I had to like get clear about what I was doing. It's also when I came up with like the base shadow color mixture on my palette, because all my students kept asking me like, how do you mix the shadow color? And I was like, I have to come up with an answer for this. So then I, kind of developed the blue and orange mixture that I use. And it's like a really good mixture that makes my work better, because now I'm like crystal clear. This is how you mix. I mean, obviously it's always tinted, in different directions, but that's like a good base to start. But I also really love what you said there about how it's almost like both have benefits, actually, especially for for all of us as teachers, but also for the person starting out with teaching. Like recording a class, it takes that pressure off where you're like freaking out. You have to paint in front of people. You don't know if it's going to be any good, and you don't know if you can talk and paint at the same time. You can record it, you can do a voiceover, you can take some time editing it and make, it takes that performative like pressure off. But also I love what you said about how the in-person classes, or even like in person on Zoom, even like when you've got your recorded sessions and now you're playing it to your students on Zoom, but then they ask questions and then you can like write down notes about all their questions, because they're actually really brilliant and help you figure out better how to be a better teacher.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's that, ultimately it's about the relationship between, the teacher and student. I personally, I have a hard time with that dynamic. Like generally it's like I've had simply just more time and experience with this stuff versus the people who are watching what I do. And so, but I have a hard time personally with that kind of hierarchical kind of tradition of kind of teacher, professor, instructor being elevated over students. And for me, I just embrace the model of it being a kind of more of a modeling, right? Like a guide more than in that. And that's just kind of where I'm landing now, but that's evolved over 20 plus years of doing this, and trying to just figure it out and observing other teachers, observing the artists that I work with here to see, well, how are they doing this? Like, what is something that just like with art itself, you're gaining inspiration and knowledge by studying other artists, how they work and what the results are. It's the same with teaching as well, and just you could kind of picking up little nuggets here and there, and like I really like the way this person described this thing. It's so much better, and sometimes you can take this massive concept, and if you take the time to really think about it and try to articulate it as efficiently as possible, you can realize that this massive concept can actually be simplified. And I think that's generally my process, is to try to keep making things more simple. So like for example, I have my book out called See, Think, Draw, and it helped me really take my approach to drawing and simplify it even further. It's all about this editorial process of saying, well, what can I actually shed off that's not really necessary? Or how do I describe a fundamental concept that then can be expanded upon by the student, rather than give all of this information. It's about really what is essential, and then allowing and kind of encouraging people who are taking that information in to find their own connection with it and expand from it at the way that they want to, so that it's not a matter of falling in line with the curriculum, but being supported by it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. When is See, Think, Draw coming out? I can't wait to read it.
Well, it's out for pre-order now on Amazon. So it'll be available in print in June 7th, I think is what it is.
I'm definitely going to order a copy. Yeah, I think you're right. Like simplifying it. Like I've had some professors who seem really like scientific and verbose, and I'm like, oh my God, how are you still talking? Like you could have just said this in like 2 sentences or something. Yeah. And sometimes I've been like jealous that I can't be that kind of person. I just like, well, sometimes I probably talk too much, but but I think overall having the goal of like simplifying the material and just like making it clear so it's not bogged down by like excess details. But I also really liked what you said about modeling and sort of being like letting your students see that like you're an artist and you're still developing your techniques, and we're all doing that. We're always going to be, hopefully anyways. And so I know, like, with is it your YouTube, which videos series is it that you have where you kind of, have a different goal, say each week, to work on with, whether it's texture or whether it's shading. I'm not sure which. Do you want to talk a little bit about that idea?
Yeah, it's called Drawing Together, and it's on the Artist Network YouTube channel, and it's very much a project-based thing. So it was all started, when pandemic first landed and we were all stuck at home, and I thought, well, how can I, continue to kind of create videos and connect with an audience? And this came up, it was me realizing that I needed to focus time. This is a good time for me to build my drawing skills. I have experience teaching drawing, so why don't I put that out there? My first episode, I really kind of approached it with the mindset of it being like kind of a limited series of drawing exercises. Let's start with kind of just working with line and see how that works, for example, or I can't remember which one we started with. But I very quickly realized, I think by the end of that first episode, I'm like, this isn't really it. This is not really working. And with the support of other people here at the company, we're like, let's just do a project. Let's just do a fun drawing, right? Yeah. And pick this drawing, and I realized, that is, I think if anything, the thing that I can think would be most valuable to teach anybody is how to develop a healthy habit. So that's really the foundation for it, because as artists, we all kind of learn basic fundamentals. You can pick up books and watch videos on how to learn the basics of drawing anywhere, but your growth really comes throughout the rest of your life. You'll be doing this forever, and you're continually understanding them more deeply and more expansively. So it's not a linear process where you start in one spot and you move to mastery. It's an expansion where you start with a core group, and from there you just keep building. And sometimes you challenge yourself by doing things a completely kind of quote unquote wrong way, right? And so each week I just select a new topic, a new reference photo, and I do the drawing. Let's see what we can learn from this today, and it's just about continually moving forward with that. And then throughout the process, I'll be describing what I do and my thought process for, kind of resolving some of the issues of observational drawing. But the mindset is that, like, this is the work, it's the exercise that all artists go through that we very rarely see when we see these finished paintings on Instagram or galleries or places like that. We don't see the practice that goes into it outside of art school. Once you're out of that space and you're on your own as an artist, you got to do that yourself. And there's so many people that haven't had that experience that this gets to be kind of a little taste of that, where you're just like, as an artist, you paint every day, you draw every day, you do something, and it moves you forward. And and it's not just about kind of executing and all the time. Sometimes you just do stuff. You just keep making, and then out of that something will emerge. You'll find your way in the next step that you need to pursue. So that's kind of, again, the heart of it. It's just like, let's just take time out of our busy lives to just draw. That's it. Like, we don't have to think any bigger about it, any smaller. It's just like, we're just going to draw because it feels good and it's going to help us. So. Yep.
Yeah, totally. And I think you're right. It does move you towards, whether it's like a little technical goal or even just like the seed of an idea starts to develop for a whole body of work, or who knows, just as long as we're doing, like, some work consistently. And I love that it's like we both have a similar approach to just like being transparent about how we're still working. Like, it takes work and we have to focus and we sort of have to keep pushing forward. And sometimes I think, maybe especially when I was starting out teaching, I probably felt like maybe there was a bit of pressure to like pretend to be like the hierarchical like teacher,
Yeah.
And I think as I get more confident about myself as an artist, even though of course I'm all, there's only a certain level of confidence anyways, but I just don't have to pretend anymore. Like, so I'm, I share my like process with my the artists I work with in my art mentoring program, that I apply to things and don't get in, and then it's disappointing, like we all do it, and just like it's so normal, and it's good to like remove that facade from the whole thing, that like then you're an artist and then everything is good and you never have to work at it ever again. Yeah.
Like, I don't know, that just seems boring to me. Like the idea of mastery seems really boring.
Yeah,
because
true.
And that's I mean, I think that the thing is like, I think for me, what I realized, and I kind of took for granted for a long time as a teacher, is that I feel really lucky that I have the impulse to paint or draw, and in most of the time I know what to do. I'm like, I need to go out here and paint, or I'm going to do this today. Sometimes I don't. I just kind of go out but I have some sort of clarity in the next steps that I need to take. And what I realized is that there's just a lot of people out there that don't. They have the desire to create, they have the desire to go, but they don't really know, well, what does that mean? What do I want to do? I don't know. It's like trying to decide what's for dinner can be hard to choose sometimes, right? But we kind of know the experience that we want to have. And so by having somebody just say, like, let's just do this week, then it keeps you moving. Like it just like, and get you comfortable. Like, don't overthink what you're doing. If you don't really know, just do something. And then out of that, then you'll gain clarity. And that's the kind of counterintuitive thing for a lot of people, is that you feel like they feel like they have to sit back and wait for that spark of inspiration, that this is who I am as an artist. I'm like, that only comes out through being exposed to things. Like, creativity is only a reaction to the things in your environment. So you have to feed your environment for creativity to happen. And that's the hardest part, that I think, like I said, I feel really lucky that I naturally have that, but I took that for granted for a long time, and I realized there's a lot of people who don't. So that's the goal. Is I'm like, sure, I can teach the fundamentals of line, shape, value, form, texture, all of those things, and that's it, like, but it's just like, how do you keep moving forward? You just keep making, so that you're constantly exposing yourself to the things that are going to lead to a creative breakthrough.
That's like so valuable, because that's like what you offer in your YouTube videos. So people can kind of hop on board and start to get into this practice of just like choosing something and doing it, working on texture or whatever. You can toss, like you say, the principles of drawing into it, but sort of having this bigger picture about just like steady progress. And thinking less. For a while there, I was waking up in the morning and making a list of like 20 ways I could improve what I do. It's some kind of self-improvement thing that I was, doing. Mm-hmm. And I kept writing down like, think less and paint more. Just like do the paintings and like think less about it. And I just feel like that's kind of like similar to what you're saying. Yeah.
And I feel like too, I mean, one of the things that's also been on my mind a lot lately is really questioning our individual motives for painting or drawing or creating art, in any way. There's that for me, I value that it's the personal experience is the thing. I've never thought about art for an audience. And I think that's held me back a lot in terms of showing, and I've had some shows here or there, but it's hard for me to put myself in that space of saying I'm making this painting for someone else, because it's such a personal experience. And so, but my model for what a successful artist was the showing, gallery artist, or eventually a museum, right? And I would just beat myself up for that over and over again, because I'm like, I just don't have that. And then there are certainly people out there that's the primary goal, is to say, I'm doing this. It's me, but it's for you. There's that relationship, or there's some sort of transformation that's going to happen, within the viewer, within the audience, as a result of this work. And but I think because I don't think we have there is no kind of standardized version of what an artist is, like at the foundation, like what the role of an artist is. It leads to all of this bickering back and forth, like this is art or that's not art, or things like that. And my biggest fear is that there are people out there that have the desire to create, maybe that's not about creativity, right? It's not about doing something unique that nobody has ever seen. The value in is just simply having that experience. We don't do that with other art. Like we don't, people go out to the club to go dancing because it feels good to dance and be around other people, not because they're communicating something more deeply, like a ballet or modern dance performance. Like you go out and do it, and or you go to karaoke and sing because it just feels good to sing. You do it in your car, and maybe you have visions of one day becoming a performer, but you never stop doing that, right? But for some reason, I feel like there are people who, with art, it's something different. Like you feel like as soon as I decide to make work, I'm labeling myself as quote unquote an artist, and then it comes on with whatever preconceived notions you have about what an artist is. You think of Van Gogh or whatever, and you're like, well, it's not really me. I'm sure I would love to be that, right? But if in the end, I'm like, it just isn't. That's not who I am. Like, that's where what I try to convey to the students, that it's not students, but the viewers of my classes or people who might read the book, is just like, this is all about you just deepening your connection with the process, and going from there. Don't think about calling yourself an artist, and just do stuff and feel what your connection is. If it is all about telling stories and connect, like really, if it requires a viewer, then go for it. If it's not, for me, I do a painting, I might post it to Instagram, but it goes in a box somewhere, and now I just have boxes full of paintings, right? That's just what I do. And so,
paintings
yeah, and I don't really care about showing at this point. Like it's just not where my head's at, because I find so much joy in teaching, and so, and then it frees me up to just, when I paint, it's just for myself. And I recognize there's part of that, there's a certain amount of fear, because it's challenging to try to put my work out there, and I have to continue to confront that. But just trying to own the fact that how much I love to teach, and do I need to make painting my career focus or not? Or do I want it to be just for myself? I kind of like that as more private for me, But.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I like to do whatever it takes to keep it so my work is like, when I'm making it, it's just about me. And then, if I put it into shows or whatever later, it's like, it's really separate for me. Like I try to never think about, I'm painting this for a show or whatever. Yes. I just like paint it. As you know, my work's very weird. And then, whatever happened, it's two separate things or whatever. But also the thing about like being an artist is so interesting. I have like so many artists that I work with in my art mentoring program, but they actually, a lot of them may not even call themselves artists. I think that like they want to be, but they're like, when do I know if I'm an artist and stuff? And it's like, well, you're already an artist. Like as of like the moment you started making art. Like I think that's the other thing with the label, is that some people, I think it needs to be a career to be an artist, or it needs to be really serious to be an artist. But I'm really like generous with when I would give the term artist. I think like practically everyone's an artist, but if you have any creative, I don't know, if you've ever made anything, you could be an artist. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting to me how many people, though, it's like they want to be an artist and they almost look to me like, am I an artist yet? And it's just really interesting, and a little bit sad, but like that, like the word artist is so hyped or something.
Yeah.
That even when we are artists, we think we're not artists. When do I become an artist? How do I know if I'm an artist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think there's so many factors in that, that stereotype, right? So depending on the family you're in, the community you grow up in, the culture that you're raised in, there's different associations with artists and the role that the artists play within the larger community. There's so many ways forward career-wise, and I don't have the mental capacity to be able to figure it all out. And I found that it wasn't leading me anywhere healthy when I was trying to. And I'm like, there are already people. We already have critics. We have people in cultural institutions, and we have critics, and they can philosophers that can figure that all out and let that battle out. And I feel like the times when I was least happy with my work and my painting when I was comparing myself to that traditional vision of somebody who's showing, and like a feeling like I'm more capable in my work than I actually was. And why isn't it being recognized? What's wrong with this? And I wasn't being very objective. I can look back at it now and I'm like, oh, now this is why it didn't get accepted into the show. It's not good painting, right? But when I reflected on it, I'm like, I didn't paint it to demonstrate how good of a painting was. I just needed to paint. Like, I don't know, I can't help it. And I love the challenge of trying to improve and I'm constantly changing up my palette or, changing a surface here. Then I love that experience of figuring something out, and it's not leading to mastery. so I'm like,
I think it might be for you, but
I don't know. Like it's not, but that's not the goal, is to kind of reach this status. It's like, I don't know. I'm just so much happier now that I have that off my plate. And I've gone through phases of that, but I feel like it's been more consistent. But to get back to the original topic, like it was parallel to my really owning the fact that, you know what, the thing that I really love is teaching. Like, and in the end, if I think kind of existentially about the end of my career, I would rather know that I've impacted people and measured my kind of value against how many people have made things because I've influenced in this. Like, I would rather have that than say I sold X number of paintings, like, or I was in this, and like, and that's, I don't want to imply kind of any sort of value there, because I think, paintings have changed a lot of people's life. I just know it's not for me, right? And maybe at some point I'll sell my work and it'll be okay. But I'm like, the thing that brings me kind of personal esteem is hearing the comments from students that say, oh my gosh, this has been so helpful. I haven't drawn in 30 years and this has gotten me out of that. And the idea of somebody staying stuck like that, is heartbreaking.
I know. Actually, the other heartbreaking thing that you probably hear this a lot, I know I have heard this a lot, is the whole high school art teacher tells student they have no art ability whatsoever, and then the student never ever paints or draws ever again. What kind of horrible teacher? Like, you and I are both teachers. Is there any circumstance where you would ever say anything like that to any of your students? Well, like, that is a terrible teacher. It's not the truth, but the student thinks it's the truth. They think it's an objective reality. They have no skill.
And it's at a particularly vulnerable time for humans. Like, I feel really lucky that, at MICA, I was able to attend the MAT program, and we would take courses on the arts and human development. Like, how do we as humans evolve as artists? Like, what are these standard stages? And you learn that when you're, your preteen, teen years, something shifts, and it becomes really important that the marks you're making match what you're trying to copy, right? It's like, that's when all of a sudden we care about things being either realistic or matching the sort. Like, it's got to look right, right? And for some people, it comes naturally, and those people can say, all right, I'm an artist, I can do this. And for others, it's more of a struggle. And as you articulated, it's all a skill that we learn how to do. And for some people, it just comes more out naturally than others. But everything can be learned to some degree. And
100%.
But it's that stage where we say we either can or we can't. And the people who say they can't, they don't do it. Like, I remember I had this one student, it was really profound. When I first started teaching, she was in the 70s or so. She had spent her whole life working in this organization. When she retired, they rewarded her with basically just take whatever classes you want to take. You've dedicated your life to us. Let's take classes. So she's taking art classes because she hadn't done it since she was a teenager, and her drawings look like a 14-year-old, right? And here's this person who's 80 years old. And I'm like, yes, that part of her brain had just been frozen in time. And it was so cool to see that now, like a time capsule, come back. And I just think of how many people are like that could have like found joy in, throughout their lives in drawing this, used it to bring greater focus and clarity, or just to, process information and connect with your body, do all of those things, and just to feel good, that they didn't because they had decided at age 14 that they're not an artist. And I'm not gonna pick up a number 2 yellow pencil and just start making marks.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a pretty common story too. I know someone who like became a photographer because they're like, they had a high school art teacher who said they had no talent and they believed them. And so they never would draw ever again, but they became a photographer because they are like into art. And that's cool. I love photography, but it just seems like criminal. There's like a lot of like art school teachers probably with very low self-esteem themselves that would tell like, I just think if anyone's like listening to this and they had an art teacher tell them that they have no talent, go ahead and sign up for an art class. It just like it doesn't even matter. Who cares? Like just draw.
I jokingly tell people all the time I made the, I didn't make the wisest financial decision going to art school and getting an MFA, right? An MFA at a time when everybody and their brother got an MFA. But like at the same time, I'm like, I've been able to do it, right? And it again, I've been stressing out and I've been down on myself for years and years because I'm like, why am I not succeeding? And then I realized that I'm like, well, the metric was never, am I selling paint to sell paintings? My metric was just, how do I do this another day? And I'm like, wow, I've been able to continually paint. I feel really lucky. And then every other artist like you and that I've worked with here at Artist Network, it's the same thing. It's just like, how do I just make sure I can do this one more day and the next day after that? And then when I look at that metric, I'm like, wow, I've been far more successful than I was giving myself credit for. But I'm not. Yeah. Sure, I don't have a museum show, sure, but I'm like the truth is like my work's not there, right? And if I'm going to be brutally honest about it, what's that? Well, it's not because that's not the truth. It's not because when you like, quality is one thing, but then what museums and galleries are tasked with is creating an exchange with the community. And because my work isn't about that exchange, it shows in the work, right? And it some people will look at it and say, well, I really like this painting. Sure, that's awesome. And there might be kind of a personal connection or something there. But it's the foundation of my work isn't kind of built on that dynamic, I think is what it is. And so it would be.
I know what you mean for some museums, but I still think that some actually would be like the right fit for, but it doesn't. Yeah. I totally know what you're saying, but also I like this whole idea of the metric, like, and that's part of where like just making it, just surviving as an artist, just doing, it's like that shows our drive. We just, for whatever reason, really want to be an artist, and we do whatever it takes to like make it happen. And a lot of that, like for a lot of us, that means like doing online classes and sort of being creative about how to make a sustainable income, so that we can just like keep drawing and sort of share it with like others and help them. Like, I think I remember when I was like, maybe I had been a full-time artist for like a year or something. And I was like laying around, probably feeling kind of bad about myself as an artist. But then I was like, wait a minute, have I made a living off my art for the entire year with no other income from anything else? That's amazing. Like, I can't believe it. Yeah. And now, I don't know, it's been like 20 years or something like that, or maybe a little under 20. But I mean, we're just creative as artists. We can figure out how to make it happen. Yeah. But I do think that, go on.
Oh no! I mean, but that's the kind of the fuel, right? Is comparison, right? We that's how we move forward. But it can be dangerous too. And so I don't really know the way forward with that. And we all have our ups and downs, but it's that tension that between where we want to be and where we are that keeps us moving and advancing, right? And, I think we're never going to be really be fully satisfied. And I think there was a point in my life where I realized, actually, the last thing I want is satisfaction, because it's that dissatisfaction that moves me forward. I mean, but what I want is that dissatisfaction to be in control, right? And not leading me to this existential crisis that I'm experiencing right now. Like,
Oh, for sure.
And
Are
so,
you? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I like definitely, I know what you mean. Like sometimes I have all these goals and I move forward on them, but I remember I think this is around when I met you. There was like a year or two where I just stopped actually showing my personal work to like anyone in the world because I just needed to like work on it in secret for a while. And I was like sick of feeling all of the like worry about what someone else would think. It was just at a sensitive time. And I had been like so goal oriented for so long that it actually was beneficial for a couple years, at least a year, I think maybe a couple years, to just be like, I'm just going to put that one down entirely and just keep making the art. Like, yeah. And then sometimes it is like useful to feel all these goals and work towards them or whatever. But there's totally times for both. Like, and we can feel that when it's that, yeah.
Well, and it to bring it back around to teaching it, one of the stories that I tell a lot in the show is that I think it was my junior year at Micah, I wasn't managing the stress, the pressure of that. It's just, when you're surrounded by so many good artists, there's that natural kind of competitive nature of it. Like, I really want mine to look good. I don't want to look like a fool today. And I got to this point where I just wasn't managing it well. So I just approached my professor. I said, like, is it okay if I just make some bad paintings for a while or bad drawings? And he's like, sure. Like it wasn't like, it was totally an internal pressure that I was putting on myself. And all my classmates, they were really cool and supportive. I felt like a great environment. I was not managing it myself. And so I took the rest of the semester to do quote unquote bad drawings. I just changed up the materials, and I'm like, rather than trying for control, I'm going to just be more expressive and do more mark making. And I learned so much more that semester, and it felt so good to have that from an authority figure saying, yes, just chill out and just experiment. Like I'm like, that's it. That felt so good. And sometimes we need to hear that from people. We just need to hear it's okay. And because we don't really know, we make so many assumptions based on what we're seeing and what we think other artists are doing and how they're thinking. To hear somebody who you really respect and as an authority to say it's okay, you can, like, it was so good. And so I tell my viewers in the show, is like, that's every drawing I try to approach, I want to have at least a part of that feel like I've never drawn before, like because that was the part that was so exciting. And I'm like, this is not going to be a fun experience for me if I don't have a sense of discovery, because that's the exciting part. Like otherwise I'm just I know I can make the pencil do what I want it to do for whatever reason. Like I want to figure out, like, well, what happens if I do something different? What is the experience? What's the motion? What's the the whole process look like? And how do I want to feel after this? And then the drawing simply becomes a record of that. And I make a distinction between drawing and the drawing, and trying to get viewers to connect with where do you weight that? We each have our own kind of hierarchy. It's either about the drawing or it's about drawing, the process. And for me, it's so much more on the process side. But there is part of it, I'm like, I do want it to look good because that feels good. That's part of the experience. That end, you're like, yes, I feel good. But there's also like, I is looking for those kind of happy accidents or things like that also feel really good. That's got to be part of it. And for some people, it's all about execution. They're like, no, this has got to be like a commercial art piece or something. There's no wiggle room. It's got to be perfectly created, and it might lead to an unpleasant experience, or what I would think of as unpleasant, but this person might love it, right? They love that, like that the confinement of that, and so and I think, and the same with painting and the painting. And like for me, like my latest painting ended up just being wiped down entirely, because it's just like, when I was getting through there, I'm like, actually I didn't care where I was. I went out, found a spot and set up. I said, I just wanted to paint for a couple hours. So I'm just going to wipe this down. As I got out of it what I wanted, I didn't need another painting. I just needed to paint. And that's the kind of the stage I'm at right now, is just doing that and intentionally wiping things down, because then it relieves any sort of pressure, that voice inside of me that, I don't know, what's somebody going to think about this, and so.
Oh, that's so good about the piece, like about the art professor who was like, freeing you up, being like, giving you permission to just do like bad paintings. Like I have also had moments where I'm like, maybe I'll just give up and I'll just do bad paintings. And it's like, normally I actually do something kind of good at that point when I'm, but I'm not trying to. And it's hard to talk myself into like really believing it. So I think that is like the power we can use as teachers, is to be like, it's totally okay to do something that's like a bad painting. And the other thing that's okay is, if we're really tired, it's okay to not do any work and not feel guilty about it for a day or two. Like, that's another thing that we can give people permission about, managing our own energy.
No, and I think what's hard, there's kind of a catch-22 to like an art school, in that like that's the time to experiment and grow, right? But there's also the kind of the peak kind of point of comparison, when you've got 20 other people also good, and you're like, and you're seeing like your work right next to somebody else. And that's one of the benefits to drawing together, is that and I say this quite a bit. I'm like, look, you don't have to show this to anybody. Like just do this. Like, and so don't worry about that.
That's true.
Now, at the same time, the other issue with coursework is the feedback cycle, right? So what I say is, like, when you can find somebody, you can find the right person who can give you the feedback that you need in the way that you can really respond to, that's gold. Because I think we have a responsibility to the people that we're asking for feedback, and to some degree. Like, and I know a lot of people that they'll just say, they'll show their work to somebody and say, like, well, what do you think of this? And they're like, well, I love it, or I hate it. Like, that person may never have spent more than a second until this moment ever even thinking about art. So now we're putting this person onto a spot to give an opinion over something they know nothing about. They don't want to look like a fool, so they're going to say something, and then you're going to get feedback that's not valuable at all. But if you can find somebody who can analyze the work and really understand what you're going for, what would be helpful, and you can articulate what are you looking for, and they can do it in a kind way, then that's really valuable. Because then there's some people who have some really good feedback, but they're just jerks. They feel like
there's a lot of that. Why?
And it's not just about protecting feelings, but it's about being responsible in that position to the impact your words are having on somebody. If you know somebody needs harshness and you can deliver that and it works for them, go for it. If you know that this is going to break somebody, and you're doing it anyways because you feel like they need to get a tougher skin, to me, that's not the sign of a good teacher. I mean, granted, that person could benefit. I could definitely use a tougher skin sometimes.
Could you? But I don't. I don't have one, and I probably won't ever have one. It makes me think, because I think what you're saying is something that I really believe in too. That like basically there's like a little bit of a format to critiques, and I just don't think it's a good critique unless you follow this. In what I developed, I think it's like a little bit of a format. Start by analyzing it and finding something that they're doing right. There must be something, and tell them the things that they're doing right. That's going to like reinforce that and help them build on those things. And then find specifically things that they're doing that they could improve on, very specifically. So if you say like, you're a terrible artist, you have no skill, that's not specific. Like, where did I mess up? So that's kind of the sort of general format that I follow for critiques. Do you have any other critique theories? Because I think that is like a really important part of teaching.
Yeah, I mean, what I tell viewers is there's an art to asking for, delivering, and interpreting feedback. And so two of those aspects are on the artist themselves. Like how you ask for feedback can play a big role.
True.
So asking somebody, what do you think, is not going to give you an answer necessarily. Like so take some time to figure out, like, well, okay, first, let me figure out how I connect with your work. Identify where you're stuck, what your objectives are, or something. Or if you're going to ask something open-ended, be okay with a response anywhere. Maybe you want to just you're throwing a dart for feedback, and you're like, all right, what do you think? And you're just trying to get a response, and maybe that inspires you to think about. But you got to do that with a certain amount of intention. Then delivering feedback, again, when you can find somebody who can deliver the feedback and you have a trusted partner, then it's their responsibility to understand. It's a relationship, so they understand, like, well, what is this person looking for? What are my thoughts? Take some time to slow down, think about it, and articulate it. And then once you get that feedback, figure out what you're going to do with it, because you are in control as an artist of what you're going to do. Like, and sometimes I'll get some really good feedback, but I'm like, I'm not quite sure what to do with it yet. And you sit with it, you think about it, and you move on, and you figure out, like, well, how am I going to get beyond that? And maybe you ask, and maybe it's this dialogue back and forth where you say, well, this is the next step. This is what I think you should do. Or, you wait. It's a dance. It's a relationship, and it takes a certain amount of sensitivity. And I can hear some people saying, oh, you're being too delicate with this, and you got to be harsh. And I'm like, well, maybe the technique that's required here. And sometimes it's important to just say, look, this doesn't look very good. Do you want it to? Like, but or if you like, where do you want to go with this? But again, it's that relationship, and just be careful with who you're asking your feedback from, because like I said, I think putting, say, family members or friends on the spot to give feedback, it's not fair to them. It's not fair to them.
And it can be risky. Like, they'll just blurt something out, like, man, it doesn't quite look like the person. And they miss the fact that painting a portrait is hard, and you've done like a solid structured portrait. Maybe it doesn't look exactly like the person, but there's like a lot good going on. Family can be kind of brutal.
And you gotta, and there is, I think it is worth it to develop a sense of self-confidence, because I think also, like, the worst is like when, like, when things aren't said, you have your work up, and maybe you put it up somewhere and people are walking by it and they're not saying a thing. You're like, oh, okay. Well, they're not, because you would love to hear somebody walk by and say, oh my God, that looks amazing. Did you do that? And like, yes, I did. And when they say nothing, you're like, oh, ooh, what's happening? Because I really like it. But you just like say, I just need to shed all of that. Just my painting, get clarity on what you want out of it. If you're doing work that if the goal is to get it noticed and it's not, then a lack of reaction is valuable evidence.
True.
So, but it does take, I think, like I said, it's an art, and I think on all sides it's an art, and it's worth taking time to really develop that. And it can be helpful to find that creative partner that you can really trust. Because that also strengthens your own conviction when you're getting feedback from maybe somebody you don't trust, or somebody's just giving shitty feedback, then or they're just being a jerk. You're like, well, all right, no, this is what I trust this expert here. So I've like totally had that, where someone just blurts out something and I go back to my trusted like team of artists that I check in with, and I'm like, oh my God, this person said this, what do you think? And they help reel me back, and having like a group of people that you check in with regularly. Like I have like a few artists that I check in with regularly about our work, and we've done this for like at least a couple of years, maybe a few years. And so they really know my work really well now, and I really know theirs. And that's the kind of relationship that I like to develop in my art mentoring program. Because as you've been saying, there's so much self-knowledge involved. Like, what is your intentions? What is your goal? What do you want your work to look like? That it actually takes time for us to even figure that out. And kind of having people that you work with for a while, you sort of figure that out together, and then they know what you want, and then they can kind of tweak their feedback accordingly. And like when you build, like you said, your team, there's a shorthand that gets developed, right? You know each other's direction. And then also the feedback, it's it benefits both sides. Ideally the person that you're requesting feedback from is also looking at your work and saying, oh, what's in here that can help me with my work, right? And so that's, I think, again, that's really where it's really valuable. Now, I think that's different from kind of a critic, right? I've never had the opportunity for my work to be written up by a critic, but I think that's where it gets really muddy for some people when you have the word critique. That's why I specifically choose feedback.
Actually, that's
because
interesting. I never.
I think when you have a critic, their vision, their objective is fundamentally different. Their objective isn't to make an individual artist's work better. Their objective is to identify how this work says something or connects with the larger community, and how it contributes to that larger dialogue. And that's just fundamentally different, and it's got to be really hard for people to navigate. But I think that's where I think, like, again, critique implies a hierarchy that could be challenging, I think, for some, because it's like then you're looking at, you're like, all right, I'm bringing this to you. I want you to criticize it because it's like I would almost say a critique is more akin to a commercial art endeavor where, somebody is paying you to do this, and like, all right, you asked me to do this. You created this thing for this client. And they're going to criticize it. They're going to say, well, this is or this isn't what I asked for, right? And maybe it's just a matter of kind of clarifying it that way. But or if you have a panel of kind of quote unquote judges to say, well, did this meet the standards for our organization, right? Like, they're going to critique that, based on a set of criteria that they've established. Then that's different than, I think, than like what you're talking about, a team of people where you're giving feedback that is intended for mutual growth, and it's kind of the behind the scenes nitty gritty of the dirty underbelly of the art making process. So
yeah, and so personalized, like you say. Oh, that's so true. I might and I think the wording that we use for things is important. I might actually totally change what I call these things. I think I just took the word critique from art school, but you're right. It even has the word criticism almost embedded in it. I don't know for sure if that's like the root of the word, but it sounds like similar. It's totally more like personalized feedback. Like that's actually a really good point.
I mean, to me, like, a critique implies a very specific objective, and then you're critiquing it to see whether or not it met that objective. And so I think there are certain instances where it makes sense. I think group critiques are very valuable, in that, again, because there's a certain amount of shorthand where you can look at one person's work and say, well, here you can see this person is doing this. You could all benefit from this, and here's why it's valuable that this, or but of course, delivered in a kind way that I think is really kind of supportive. And the idea in that group is that, like you said, in a team, like, you're all lifting each other through this process. Like, sure, if I make a painting that fails in certain ways, everybody else can learn from that too. So I think, like I said, I think it's just a matter of determining, like, are you analyzing it based on a certain set of criteria, or are you offering feedback that is kind of more kind of undefined in a way?
Yeah, that's like so true. And I guess a lot of the time, I mean, I really think art's so personal. Like, it all depends on what the person's intentions are. So who am I to criticize unless I know what their intentions are? It might be exactly their intention that it doesn't look realistic or something like that. Like, it's like presumptuous to think otherwise. Yeah. Ooh, well, this has been such an interesting talk. It's so good to talk to you and pick your brain about all of this. Where can people find out more about what you do, see some of your classes, look at your paintings?
Sure. Yeah, go to artistnetwork.com. The show is drawing together, so you can do a search on YouTube. The book is See, Think, Draw, so that's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble right now. And then I have a website, scottmaierart.com, where I don't really update it nearly as frequently as I should. But it's got some links there, and I'm looking to, just continue to make more content, especially around drawing and into painting. So I think I want to expand into, painting instruction and go there. So, I'm going to.
Ooh, and what's your Instagram name?
Oh, Scott L. Maier, I think.
I Okay,
don't.
I'll double check it and put it in the,
Okay,
in the notes. I love following yours
Scott.L.Maier.
too.
Yeah, so, and it's Maier for those listening. It's a weird
Yes.
spelling, but
No, that's
yeah, yeah. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, thank you so much for
good to
having me on.
talk
This
to
has been an
you.
awesome conversation.
Aw, it's always really great to talk to you, and I always learn so much. Thanks for chatting.
You're welcome. I'm very honored to be on here. Thank you so much.
Well, it was really good to talk to you, so I'll talk to you soon. Bye, Scott.
Bye. Thanks.